I'm Becca and welcome to a video where I talk about the biggest books both on my bookshelf and on my to be read pile. The way this tag works is to identify the 5 largest books that I own that I've already read, and then also to show you the 2 books that are the biggest books I own that I haven't yet read. So I have a few more books than just 5 because I was worried that I would talk about authors that I talk about a lot, so I wanted to include a few different titles in here. So without further ado, let's get into the books that are very long but I have read them on my bookshelf. The first one being The Black Prism by Brent Weeks, which is the first book in his Lightbringer series, which is 5 books long. And this one is 661 pages. So as far as fantasy go, long but doable. And this one is also a multiple perspective story with a very intricate magic system around the colours where you can weave them into physical manifestations and use them to fight with, and they've got different properties as well. And there's also a magical school involved in this too. There's a lot of politics as well, but it was a very intricate, dark and interesting story, and it had a lot of political intrigue. I really enjoyed this one, but also the last book in the series comes in at 960 pages. And it's also printed in this massive edition. So the fact that you can hold them up next to each other like this, it's like, never talk to me or my son again. That's what I think of whenever I look at them on my bookshelf. Now, I thought this next one was going to be higher up on my list, but it's only 1 page longer than The Black Prism, and that is The Name of the Wind, coming in at 662 pages. I must think that this is so much longer than The Black Prism because when I first started listening to audiobooks, this was one of the first ones I did just because I'd read it before, so getting into audiobooks, it was easier to listen to a high fantasy story that I was already kind of familiar with and that I loved. And true to form, the audiobook was fantastic. And even though this one took me a while, it was still a very rewarding reading experience. Whereas now I can listen to them at double speed. So listening to The Black Prism was actually not so bad given that I could literally speed through it. So the fact that these are only 1 page difference is really intriguing to me. Now after those two, we have the first in a series, which is surprising. Usually the first in a series is one of the more shorter books in a series, but for this one, it is the longest. And that is Ruin of Kings, which is the first book in the Chorus of Dragons series, and I happen to know because I looked at all of these books before I started this video that the last book in this series is 512 pages, and given that this is 703 pages, that is a lot of difference. That's almost one whole romance book of difference. And then true to form, because I am a Brandon Sanderson fan, there had to be a few on this list. Also because he just writes a lot and so he naturally has long books. So one of the long books that I've got by him is The Hero of Ages, which is the last book in the Mistborn trilogy, coming in at 748 pages. As you can imagine, also a chonker, but one that I really deeply loved and is very action-packed. So listening to it or reading it, you're going to speed through it because it's got a lot happening in here. I think the only reason I put this one off is because The Final Empire and The Well of Ascension, the first 2 books in this trilogy, just took me a while, and I knew that I had to get past those 2 long books in order to get to this one. I think it was also just the wrong time for me to pick this book up, and I have slept on continuing reading this, but I really would like to reread all of these and then all of the Era 2 Mistborn books now that the Lost Metal has come out. I've read all of them before. I would just like to do a really thorough reread again. So that is on the cards, but I also want to reread Robin Hobb. So no pressure. There is a lot of reading in my imminent future. Speaking of a lot of reading in my imminent future, I am going to hold up Robin Hobb because this is also the 3rd in a trilogy. This is the 3rd book in the Farseer trilogy, Assassin's Quest, and it comes in at 838 pages. I feel like I need to put post-it notes or something in here to signify when chapters are so I can make it into a reading plan of some kind, because at the moment I'm just kind of staring doughy-eyed at them like maybe if I put the book on my head I'll read it by osmosis, and that's not how it happens, and I'm only going to get busier because I'm filming this just before I start Vlogmas, and I know that I'm going to have a wild time reading and trying to film and edit videos for 12 days. So will this get read? I'm hoping it will, but I'm always quite optimistic with Robin Hobb, and I've put this on several TBRs and it hasn't happened. So this might just be a big book that both stays on my TBR and also on my read shelf. Up next I've got Priory of the Orange Tree, but this is the advanced reader copy, so it might look a little bit odd. I got rid of my final copy, but that came in as 10 pages longer than Assassin's Quest at 848 pages. So I can't believe how many big books that I've got. Apparently I like high fantasy, who knew? Speaking of, Assassin's Fate, which is another Robin Hobb book. But I think Also, this one makes sense because if I was writing a series, I would probably leave my last book to also be a longer one, which, you know, case in point, this is the last book in a series of like 16 mini series. So of course it is going to be a bit meaty because you want that detail to wrap things up. I was actually disappointed that the Chorus of Dragons book, so the final Ruin of Kings book, was 512 pages because I wanted it to be like 800. Wrap that story up, give me all of the detail, and that's what this did. And case in point, if I love a long book, I really love it because I finished this in 2.5 days and I finished it crying my eyes out at 2 o'clock in the morning. This was a lot, both physically and emotionally, apparently, but it was worth it. And I think I need to remember that when I'm looking at the long books on my to be read pile and on my shelf as well that I would like to reread, because I read them before in the case that they were on my shelf, and I have read books like them before if they are a new to be read book. I can do it. I just need to make myself pick it up. I think it's getting across that mental hurdle of this book is long. Doesn't matter. I've read so many long books. Surely I can make time to read it. Then we have the final 2 books on my owned and have read shelf. I'll get into my TBR books shortly after, but Brandon Sanderson obviously came in clutch at the end because Rhythm of War and also Oathbringer are obviously 2 books in a huge series called Stormlight, books 3 and 4. Surprisingly, Oathbringer is actually longer than Rhythm of War, but only by 13 pages. So this is 1,243 pages and this one is 1,230, which, putting them side by side, you wouldn't be able to guess the 30-page difference because honestly, these are just like bricks. You would build a house out of these. But I have reread them up until Oathbringer in the series, and I finished, I think, Rhythm of War in like 6 days. So, you know, when I'm determined, I'm determined. Now to get into my to be read books, which seem a little bit silly holding them up after showing all of the long books that I've read. Okay. This book is 503 pages, which is basically like one of those other books' babies, but that is Foundry Side. I can't believe this is so tiny in comparison to the others. And I've put this on 2 or 3 to be read videos and I haven't started it yet. So hopefully I can start this either during Vlogmas or at the end of the year. If not then, must be in January. Surely. I want to read this very soon because I really enjoyed City of Stairs and I want to read more by Robert Jackson Bennett, so that is the goal. Then we've got another one by Samantha Shannon who wrote The Priory of the Orange Tree, and that is not the one that you guessed, which is the one behind me. It is The Bone Season and that is 560 pages. She released this anniversary edition as a rewrite because she wrote the first book when she was 19, obviously wanted to do a lot of changes and tightening to it, so I'm looking forward to delving back into this already familiar story and seeing what she has done with the world and the characters and the intention of the work. I'm really excited about it, but I'm also in no rush. This one doesn't intimidate me because of the length. I just want to time it so that when I've read this one, I can then read her eventual revisions. I'm assuming she's doing more revisions of the Mime Order and the Song Rising because I want to reread this series, but I don't want to wait for ages in between each one. And I do have the other books, I get that, but I also want to read her revisions. So this one is not a huge priority for me. The other book by her though happens to be a priority and I feel a bit ashamed by it. And that is obviously A Day of Fallen Night. I've tried this twice and I can't get into it, so I'm hoping that it's just my mood that is affecting me and the fact that I feel intimidated by it because obviously it is a very long book. This comes in at 846 pages, so it's about on length with Assassin's Fate, so they're like 3 pages difference. This is a huge book and it's a prequel, whereas Assassin's Fate was the conclusion to a long-standing series. So it feels different approaching this one because I know that straight out of the gate I'm going to have to commit to 800 plus pages, whereas with Assassin's Fate I'd already committed to these characters, this story, this flow, and I was like, this is going to be an epic conclusion, and it was. This one I'm like, this has to be the beginning, middle, end, and epic conclusion all in one book, and that is a lot, and I don't know if it can really deliver on those expectations, but I'm really hoping that it does. So there you have it. Those are all of the biggest books on my bookshelf. I could probably go through and look at all of the different page counts for everything, but I reckon my ballpark for reading is around that 500 page mark. Those are usually the books that I reach for, and they are like a normal fantasy length. Like The Bone Season, that's 560 pages. I reckon that's more within my realms of possibility. I think with my median page count every year that Goodreads calculates on my behalf, it was like 470 something last year. It's probably going to be a little bit more skewed higher this year because I've read more fantasy books and fantasy series this year, and they tend to be a bit longer than say romance would be, but I think it will work out to roughly around 500 pages. So when I look at Foundry Side, which is 503 pages, I'm like, that is your average, Beck. Off you go. chop chop, read the book. That's basically how I feel about my entire to be read pile, to be honest. It's like a constant, hey, read this thing, and me going, I will scroll Instagram. But anyway, now I'm rambling. Let me know if you've got any long books on your to be read pile or that you've already read. We all need to celebrate our own achievements. Let me know down below in the comments. Thank you so much for watching this video. I'll come chat to you below and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.